We're now going to kick off with our first panel, and the first panel will talk about how that return to operations will happen. As I mentioned earlier, we're now going to also move into more of an interactive mode where you have the possibility to ask questions. For this, we'll be using Slido, which is a tool that allows you to contribute your questions in written form. You can do this either by putting it into the streaming video window. You'll see from time to time there's a panel that opens up that allows you actually to contribute the question, or you can go to slido.com on your phone or any other device you may have to hand, and you need to put in then the code for today's event, which is #ASC1. So #ASC1 should be showing. Due to the large number of participants, we won't be able to answer all of the questions. What we will do is we will have the moderator actually selecting the questions, and they will then be addressed by the panel. But you can ask questions at any time using these various possibilities. We'll also be using polls in the next session, so I would encourage you to set yourself up with Slido so that you can, in fact, take part in those sessions. Now it's time to move straight on to that first session. I would like to introduce our EASA Head of Safety Intelligence, Erick Ferrandez.
Thank you, Janet. It's a pleasure to be here, especially in this testing time for all of us. So it's a pleasure to connect with the aviation community. So here we are, and we are going to talk about safety during this panel. So before we start that, I think it's important that we acknowledge that we are all focused on recovery. We are focused on the return to normal operations. I think we are all observing and monitoring how this pandemic and its consequences unfold and impact aviation. And we are trying to weather the storm. However, it's important that we find this road to a safe and sustainable recovery. So this is in this context that we want to discuss safety. As Patrick mentioned, we want to discuss what this has done to us, what are the new risks that have emerged out of this new reality that we have to face, how we have reacted, and what the future holds for us in terms of safety management. So for this discussion, I have welcomed 4 panelists. So we will have with us a manufacturer with AIRBUS, so Sophie Rougé, with the head of safety governance in the AIRBUS product safety department. We have the German air navigation service provider with Osman Saafan. Osman is the Director of Safety and Security Management and Military Affairs at the DFS. We have an operator with Captain Jim Pegram from easyJet. So Jim is the Head of Safety, Security and Compliance. And finally, we have the European Commission with Mr. Peter Sørensen. Peter is the Deputy Head of the Aviation Safety Unit as Directorate General MOVE. So I think we have tried to have a quite diverse representation of our community, of the aviation sector, but of course we don't have all the domains. So I hope that through the Slido tool, through the Q&A, the question and answers, you will also interact with us and contribute. So on that, I just would like to get back to what Janet was explaining a minute ago, that the Slido is now open. And because we have such a large audience, I invite you to start asking your questions as of now. So on this, I would like to go to the first question that we'll try to address as a panel. And the first question will be to a bit contemplate what happened in the past month for us. So how the safety landscape has been changed and what we have done to react to that. So before we go to the panelists, I would like first to present a couple of slides and present the EASA perspective on that. So if you look at the slide that is shown now, What I would like to share with you is what we believe are the key changes. Of course, there was a lot. But if we compare the situation before and now, I think these three things are really shaking up the safety landscape. First of all, before, we have a stable aviation ecosystem. And when you have a stable system, your safety landscape, your safety situation is also stable. It was quite well known. Not that it was easy, but it was well known. So now, we have a very fluid and uncertain ecosystem. We don't know what the new reality will be, where it will stabilize. So consequently, the safety is also uncertain and very fluid, the safety issues. Second point, the main challenge before was that we had a very safe system. And for us, as a community, the challenge was to make it safer. So we were really working very hard, capturing data, analyzing data, doing what we call safety intelligence, to identify all the weak signals, the precursors of the safety risks, so that we make the system safer. So now, the challenge we had in a system that was completely shaken up was to identify the new risks, and quickly. And that we had to do with no or few data, because of course we have no benchmarking. This situation is unique in the history of aviation, as we know. The third point that I would like to share with you is a complacency. Because again, before the situation was stable and safe, and we know it's part of human nature that when it's safe, it's stable, you can become complacent. But we also know, as aviators, that this was wrong. And we wanted to be always safer. So we were constantly fighting the potentially to be complacent. So now we have to look at the reality. Many organizations in aviation are struggling for their very survival. So the problem now we have is to ensure that the focus remain on safety. And as Patrick mentioned, the last thing we need is serious incidents or even accidents at this stage. So what we've done, EASA, we have activated our network of collaborative safety partners. I will not go into details, but just for you to know that the way we work, we have a number of forums, groups, where we work not only with the national aviation authorities, but also with the industry, the ATM, the airport, the operator, the manufacturers, training organizations, maintenance organizations, and we collect together some data and we analyze. And the idea of that is, of course, to identify the risks. And before the pandemic, we are working, as I mentioned, on detecting these weak signals to make the system safer. Now, what we did in the past months, as soon as March, in a record time, we established together the new safety landscape. What are the risks that emerged out of that? And we came up with what we have called the COVID-19 risk portfolio. So on that, I will not go into technical details. We don't have time today. But we identified about 50, exactly 48 safety issues. For instance, you had the most known ones are, that was mentioned by the Cologne-Bonn Airport CEO, the wildlife, the increased risk on wildlife presence on the airport, the rapid storage and discharge of airplanes, the lack of recency of all the staff, in particular the pilots. So we capture all these safety issues and we put them into these 6 main categories that you can see now on the slide. Again, I will not go into details. I just would like to mention that you see 2 hyperlinks, and those are links to our website and are Together for Safety promotion community site, where you will see all the details. The main message here is this work was very important because the risk was that we all identify these new risks in isolation. And by doing that, there was a risk that we all cut and slice these safety issues in a different manner. And when you do that, if you don't have a consolidated approach, you may end up with overlaps when we talk to each other, or even some gaps. So from the European perspective, this list of 48 safety issues categorized into these 6 main categories, are providing us a common dictionary, a common way to look at the new risks that have emerged out of this crisis. So this is the main take of EASA on the safety aspects. So with that, I would like now to turn to Sophie Rougé from AIRBUS and ask her, from the AIRBUS perspective of product safety, but also working closely with their operators, what is their take and what they took out of this crisis. So Sophie, on to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Is it okay? Is it okay?
Yes. Yeah. Sophie, I think we are on. Please, go ahead.
I'm on. I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you. So as aircraft manufacturer, yes, as you mentioned it, Erick, we should consider that even if our duty is to deliver safe aircraft, we have to consider the global picture of the total aviation system as the whole. And it's the reason why we consider in AIRBUS that this total aviation system leads us to consider also safe operations of our product at the end. And it is the reason why our safety policy and associated safety strategy today rely on total systemic approach and approach. And in order to better anticipate new safety threats, not only with our customers, but also with our supply chain. And we are just studying within this total safety chain and global safety chain as a whole. So taking into account that, now I would like to show you a slide and on how our safety landscape has changed with the AIRBUS. So regarding the context, as you can see, for us, it's sure the COVID-19 has a huge impact in terms of economic and sanitary measures, but it's a risk of loss of vigilance from a product safety point of view. Then it's a big change between the before and the after, so associated with instability. And on top of that, we have higher expectations from our public regarding social and environmental measures, so it's additional challenges. Regarding our risk exposure, we had for sure a large service fleet before the crisis, and now we have a massive fleet grounding with our customers for sure, and we have to recover this return to service. And we had a ramp up, and we have now to slow down through a ramp down with our supply chain and our production lines, taking into account the COVID-19 potential safety impacts, in particular for these manufacturing lines. But complacency remains a high risk and is still there, so it's a concern today. So it's the reason why, in the framework of our AIRBUS SMS, we have launched a dedicated task force for the COVID-19 in the Common Component Management of Change of SMS, taking into account the product safety impact of this pandemic. So it was a cross-functional task force in order to perform a safety risk analysis and to really anticipate how to support our operators to face those new safety threats, in particular, for instance, related to massive aircraft grounding, parking, and storage. And the second sprint was also how to anticipate on our own operations. So it was a task force with a bow-tie methodology that we used, and the outcome is a safety risk portfolio with around 80 actions, 80 barriers in order to reduce the risk and to mitigate such risk. And on top of that, we have set up a monitoring of these actions in order to ensure the efficiency of the actions we had set up. So what did this crisis highlight for us? Firstly, the necessity to get a strong safety culture, to reaffirm at all levels of the organization that product safety remains a priority even during such a sanitary crisis. Secondly, that information sharing is key and a key asset to ensure the end-to-end approach and the systemic approach we would like to follow, and to come with this associated resilience. And the last and not least is the fact that this digitalization transformation was key for us also to identify weak signals, but also to monitor the actions and the barriers we have set up in order to face the COVID-19 potential risk.
Many thanks, Sophie, for this. I think it was very interesting. Indeed, the manufacturer is at the heart of an ecosystem between the operators, but also, as you explained, all the suppliers. So it was very good to see your take and what you've done on that. Now I would like to turn to Osman to bring us some insight from an ATM and ATC perspective of how they analyzed the crisis and what they've done about it. So Osman, I would like to turn to you and give you the floor. Osman, please.
Erick, thank you very much. Also for me, it's a great pleasure to be with you all and to support this important panel. And although I would have never expected something different, but I'd really like to say that I'm delighted to listen to Patrick Key, to Johan Koolsman, to Johan van Eester, in particular, Johan van Eester, responsible for an airport who's suffering as many airports do, highlighting the importance of safety in that crisis, where we suffer so much. In particular in the area of our economics. I would like to go to the ATM side, and I want to make clear from the outset that I do not speak for myself or for DFS alone, but I'm gifted and I'm a member of many forums and may share the insights of many colleagues globally here as well. So perhaps DFS is just one example, perhaps a good one, but just one example. So, and as many of us, I think perhaps I should start there. We didn't see it coming, but I may say that that the sudden absence of air traffic was actually not an issue from the point of safety at first. Perhaps we can compare that with the volcanic ash crisis in 2010, already 10 years ago. We had a sudden absence of traffic as well, or a downturn, but this was not really a problem. But in terms of economic impact, this is very different and very dramatic, and is affecting the entire industry. DFS, as many others, had to borrow money to meet commitments and pay salaries, which is a difficult thing. The industry is trying to rapidly adapt to the situation. As we heard from the previous speakers, people are laid off or are being sent on leave. Investments are stopped or delayed. It's called downsizing. And here we need to understand how this potentially can affect safety and security. I would like to say for DFS as well and for many others, we have fully understood that we need to react and to further adapt. However, we also need to have a very thorough conversation and consideration of what needs to be done now and what needs to be or what is needed to be done in the interest of all of us in order to secure the future and of a strong European aviation system and economy. So I would like to touch, please remind me of that, onto two horizons we should keep in mind. So what happened? What has happened in the recent months? It was very clear before the pandemic that there was and is still a relationship between the volume of air traffic and potential for conflict or adverse events. And in the consequence, and at least to my knowledge, there have been fewer adverse events, such as separation, minimum infringements, runway incursions, excursions, and so on and so forth. However, this year, and even with this low volume of traffic, a number of incidents have occurred all over Europe and the globe. Let me remind you of August, when the pandemic was full behind us. The Air India Express rolled over the runway, and we had fatalities. May I remind you of May, Pakistan International Airlines into a residential area. So we saw things. And also in the middle of Europe, only 2 aircrafts are needed, one approaching, one taxiing. 2 aircraft are enough to end up in a runway incursion. So what I try to pass on here, when you say, does the safety landscape has been changed totally? There can be an argument saying that the landscape of safety is in a constant change. Perhaps not everything is new, but one thing is clear, safety is not something that is given even under these circumstances. And this may be already a takeaway, and Patrick made it very clear as well. Safety is something that we have to work out and deliver on a daily basis. So it's not carried in itself. So to avoid exactly the situation, not to encounter, in addition to the economic crisis, I would like to call it, a safety critical event or situation, we were very, very busy as organizations, as industries in the ATM ANS area. The first thing, of course, was that's not a standard thing. This was something we had never experienced before, and that the change is ongoing. So this makes a difference. And I would like to point out 1 or 2 examples, maybe. And as part of the routine, of course, we carried out a functional hazard analysis, as we do. And we did not do this in isolation, so not alone in our own views. We exchanged with partners within CANSO. This is our big association. We jointly developed safety arguments together with Eurocontrol. If I may refer to Antonio Lico and his team, fantastic team. We worked together quite effectively. And we complemented our methods back home. And again, I do not speak only for DHS, but for really all of the European and even global agencies. As you said, Erick, we identified a good 2-digit number of hazards. And interestingly, hazards we haven't met before, like questions, do you have enough operational staff available and competent staff available for safe ATS provision? And our analysis prevailed that it's, of course, we had enough ATCOs available, and perhaps sometimes more than we needed, and definitely they were competent. If you understand under the term competent, the technical skills, so no problem here. If there was an issue, that would have been a training, be it simulator-based or a briefing or whatever. So things we were used to. But what we weren't used to is, what about the validity of their licenses? So ATCOs must work for a minimum of hours in a defined period of time. And all over Europe, suddenly you found people who for weeks and even months only had a few flights on their frequency at all. There were many people who hadn't worked for weeks at all. So this is a kind of threat or risk or situation we hadn't encountered before. So this is something where we needed or felt the need for some action. And now that I refer to the technical skill degradation, perhaps it's important to refer to something else, because we as ANSBs are building on, we like to say, a good human-man-machine or human-machine setup. You may call it joint cognitive system, which sounds more modern. Therefore, the human being plays and will remain to play a very, very important role. What about the important routine an ATCO is relying on? What about the self-confidence, the perhaps individual stress limits? And here we encountered some situations and we felt there could be something we can do. And something more, I'd like to show you one or two slides afterwards. We identified other issues. We already touched on so-called surgical masks and plexiglass walls. Johan van Neeste touched on it as well. Yes, we introduced this as well because we wanted to protect our people's health. But then you encounter different things. So when you go with a really good mask, the FFP2 and 3, the intangibility via radio was too limited. So you had to do something else. When you install plexiglass walls, they may disturb the important elbow coordination between EDCOs. So this was really something we needed to go about. This needed another assessment and adaptations. So perhaps you may help me in putting up the two slides you asked me to provide. And I could refer to one example. No, the other one, please, the first one. Yes, wonderful. So I just want to touch on this because I was really delighted when this idea was born by some colleagues in my directorate here to understand, hey, how can we support our people at the front end? How can we back up them? And what they did already in the very beginning of March, they developed a kind of postcards, small brochures, with which we eliminate various aspects in coordination with the operational managers, because this needed to be backed up by the entire company. This cannot be only provided by the safety department. When you go into the operations and you want to back up people, you need, of course, a good collaboration with all processes, amongst all processes and divisions within your industry company. So just to show you this poster, we touched on five topics. This poster you can find in any of our units. And the good thing is, perhaps I may share this as well, this initiative, of course, what has been shared globally through CANSO, copied, further developed. You may find it all over, Stay Sharp, or however it's called. And this is what I personally really like within the safety community: sharing, learning, improving, sharing again. So this is really great that we come together and collaborate, in particular in this difficult situation. So when you might want to have a quicker look, I don't know, Erick, when time permits, but just to pick out one maybe, it says on the very top, the current traffic situation requires a high amount of flexibility. And of course, all airspace users finding themselves almost alone in the airspace, if I may put it this way, want to go from A to B directly. But,
Osman?
Please refer to rules and procedures.
Yeah, Osman?
When you need your capacity, yes?
Yes, I'm sorry, but I think I'm also have to be conscious a bit of the time, and I'm afraid we are a little bit going a bit behind. So if you could maybe get to your conclusions, that would be nice. Thank you.
Absolutely. Please go to the second slide. So at least I would like to talk about the two horizons then. And this is what I tried to touch on in terms of what is needed now. So we have to understand changes of the way, and particularly it's not only the target state we're talking about. We need to have a clear understanding where we want to go, but the transition is of great importance and need to be looked at. Be aware, traffic is coming in waves, and unfortunately, not like a nice mountain with a smooth increase and then smooth decrease again. It's like a skyscraper, you know. And this peaking will or is allowed to introduce another risk or threat. Now that I talked about downsizing, when we talk about downsizing, we need to keep in mind that there are interdependencies. So if we delay investments or stop investments, we need to be aware that these areas do have interdependencies and we need to manage them. When we go to the second horizon, as I said, we need to understand what should be the state, the target state, and we believe that we need to move much more quickly from air traffic control to air traffic management. I think this is of great importance, and here we need some more things, like we want to increase the system resilience. Resilience means or has a lot to do with people. And I like to echo Sophie, safety culture here is of great importance, including just culture. And of course, maybe last, we need a supportive regulatory framework and harmonized implementation. And we can only win and overcome the situation together. So we need to have a well-coordinated and aviation system-wide approach, if I may put it this way. So it was a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, and it will remain. The question is, how will we answer? Thank you very much, Eric, and sorry if
Thank you very much, Osman. No, very, very interesting. A lot of insight on the ATM perspective for that. Sorry, I had to cut you a little bit. I know it's frustrating because there is so much to say about this crisis. Now I would like to turn to Jim from easyJet. And as an operator, I think, Jim, you are in the front line, certainly concerning the economic impact, but also on safety. So I would like to hand over to you now so that you can share with us what you did in terms of safety to go through this crisis so far as an operator. So Jim, on to you.
Thank you, Eric, for that introduction. And we certainly have got a lot of challenges facing us, and new challenges that are changing all the time that we've got to find ways of managing. And certainly the scale and pace of change in the entire aviation system is unprecedented, as is the financial pressure the whole aviation system is under. We marry that with cultural, environmental changes, changes in working practices, which, you know, for us are changing all the time as we reach new agreements with our staff around downsizing, part-time working, the prospect that they then take on second jobs, commuting. We have the whole issue of frequency of operations and maintaining aircraft and competency of staff. So some of the assumptions we've made in the past may not still be valid, nor the data that we've used be valid for this new scenario. So whilst we don't want to throw out what we've learned and the processes we have in place, we have had to think about some new approaches and how we develop those new approaches. I'll now share with you a couple of slides to give you what can only be a quick trot through our approach to managing this crisis. So we've worked within our existing system, although our existing system we've had to enhance in particular areas. But one of our key safety principles is the principle of SOC, safety, operational and commercial goals. And that really is a principle of optimization. And it's good for two or three reasons. The first one is it ensures that the safety conversation is taking place at the same time the operational and commercial conversation is going on. So it gives us a stake in those conversations. Secondly, it helps us optimize and ensure we get a solution right first time, which also prevents us going back and doing costly reworking to encode safety typically into whatever the solution is. So that's the first thing. The second thing that is really important, we really focused on and we brought forward some of the developments we were already thinking around risk management, is putting risk management at the center of everything we do. And so we came up with a COVID-19 risk register with around 130 items on it, and taking the principle of SOC into consideration, we were not overly fussed whether the things on there were safety, commercial or operational risks, because they will all impact safety, as safety will impact commercial and operational risks. And with that, we risk assessed each of those risks, and where appropriate, we put additional controls into place, which had to then be formally accepted by the risk owner, and that was presented forward before action was taken. So typically we had all of the risks accepted and presented ahead of our restart operation. So clearly management of change is key in there as well. And we have a process called operational readiness. And this is where our risks and management of change come together in a single process. And operational readiness is all around making sure we've got the right people at the right place at the right time, with the right equipment and training in an environment conducive to good performance and the right level of supervision. And finally, governance structure was really, really important as well. I think there is so much going on, it's very easy to get lost. And so being really clear about what the priorities are, how you're going to organize, and how you're going to mobilize your workforce to manage those priorities is really, really important. So in the first part of this whole COVID pandemic, we identified for us 4 really key big pieces of work. The first was around managing the tactical operation, okay, and that included downsizing as countries and airports closed, maintaining minimum operations, and we did stop commercial flying, but we did still have flying going on around maintenance and the movement of aircraft around the network, and then the ramp up. And within that, we managed all those exemptions, temporary changes, and the more permanent changes. The second thing was maintaining our approvals. So we continued to manage safety in the way that we've always done. We didn't change any of our safety meetings at all. But what we did lay over was processes to manage the COVID risk. And we've talked about how we did that through OPR and the risk registers. So we continue to have live and active air operator certificates, 3 of them, plus the services provided centrally into those AOCs. The third big task was to think about biosecurity and actually set up a biosecurity standard and a biosecurity system within easyJet. Again, linking into all the existing tools that we had, but we still had to find some new tools to help us. And an example of that would be what we call the BOE tool, which assesses the level of threat of biosecurity and what level of control we should have in place. And as you're aware, UK is just going down into another lockdown, and we've just stepped that up to the next highest level. And then final, people and organizational change. We've all had to change our organizations and downsize, and we took a very controlled approach to doing that. And that one itself was a great piece of work, but a piece of work worth doing, as I'll demonstrate in a moment. So if I go on to the next slide. Oh, I think we got a little technical hitch there. It's not quite working for me. Yes, thank you very much indeed. If I go on to the next slide, we got to a point, I guess, towards the end of August, beginning of September, which we contained the first part of the emergency to start thinking around, well, what lays ahead? How do we manage what lays ahead? And clearly, one of the really big goals for us is summer 21. So we still needed to manage risk and survive, but we also now need to manage risk and prepare to strive. And so actually, because Easter's early this year, for us, that's the 28th of March, we need to be fully ready to go with all our aircraft, all our crew, or whatever the working assumption is that we're working to. So we got to thinking, well, actually, that's going to play back into this time period as well. So it's not, we can't wait until this time period is over and then start thinking about the summer. We need to think about it now because it will play back into this period. So we set up a stream of work around summer 21 readiness and managing the risks around preparing for summer 21 readiness through specific working groups and OPRs that can focus on those activities. So we start with people and organizational change. Again, we've got a lot of people outside of the organization. We're looking to still spool up now. We need to make sure we're properly resourced. Actually, because we've already done the work once around the downsizing, we just need to plug new assumptions in to drive the answer out. We need to make sure our crew are fit and competent for duty. And, that's also around their welfare, fitness, both physical and mental, but also around the competency. We need to make sure our third parties are ready to go as well. The aircraft are unparked and ready and serviceable. Again, that is a work stream that we've managed through an OPR, and therefore, that's an existing process we can hook into. Biosecurity, we have that process set up, but instead of now kind of focusing on reacting to all the governmental changes, we've kind of got that hacked now. We need to be looking forward and saying, well, what is it we need in place for operations next summer, and you rapidly get on to what do we need to do to build passenger confidence and all those issues around testing, etc. And then finally, to coordinate all of those activities, but also to coordinate them with the other operational goals and the commercial goals, we have a readiness for 2021 summer, which we've kicked off to coordinate all of those activities. Now that's one stream of work. The second stream of work is making sure we don't drop the ball on business as usual. So all those processes will continue. We've identified a number of key risks that we need to continue to focus on and reduce the unwanted risks with those and improve performance, such things as was mentioned earlier around bird control. We have some significant changes as well that we need to keep our eye on because they will have an impact if we don't manage them well. For example, the introduction of part camo, for us, Brexit, etc., all of which we need to manage. And then finally, supporting all of that activity, we've got some developments we need to do with our management system around risk, Brexit, introduction of part camo, safeguard our safety culture, because that's key, because at the end of the day, you can have as many processes as you like, but it still comes down to people to implement safety. And of course, you know, with all the turmoil, I don't think there's been a time when human factors hasn't been more important in our organization. So that's the sort of approach we've taken. And I think it really comes down to sort of nailing the priorities, nailing how you're going to organize, and then mobilize to get this activity done. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. So it was very inspiring to see how an operator has managed the risk. I think I will remember what you said, you manage risks and survive. So I think that's the difficulty. Now, I would like to turn to Peter. We will have to speed up a little bit. It's a message for my panelists because we are slightly behind the schedule. So Peter, from the European Commission perspective, DG Move, could you share with us what's your take on the current pandemic? Peter, on to you.
Thank you, Erick, and welcome to everybody. I think that the way you'd asked me to look at the question, you'd asked me to what was the EU perspective on the safety impact of this crisis. And in considering that, I guess being somewhat flippant, a response could be to say that this crisis has had no obvious impact on safety, at least in terms of considering safety-related events that could be directly attributed to the coronavirus pandemic. I say flippant, as it appears to be stating the obvious when you consider the vastly reduced levels of operations and the fact that it's difficult to draw this direct link between the coronavirus and an eventual impact on aviation safety, much unlike the volcanic ash crisis to which Osman made reference earlier on. On the other hand, and much more to the point, I think it's fair to say that as a consequence of this crisis, we have been able to see a solid and a mature reaction to assure a fundamental principle in aviation, and that is keeping air travel safe. And I say that with two perspectives in mind, the somewhat more traditional operational aviation safety perspective, and then also the evolution and developments in terms of aviation health safety. A key consideration for actions taken at DG Move level, and I would assume also at EASA, has been to ensure the survival of the industry without compromising effective safety oversight, despite the strain the crisis has put and continues to put on available resources. We've worked hand in hand with EASA, with the member states, with the industry stakeholders to identify and enact the appropriate actions. Erick, you mentioned, and so did Patrick Key, what has been done at EASA level, and a visit to your dedicated COVID-19 resources webpage will quickly reveal what has been done in terms of producing such things as safety directives, the safety information bulletins, and other guidance material. On the DG Move front, we took early action to mitigate the impact of the crisis by deferring the entry into force of a number of legislative acts. And we did that with a mind of enabling the use or better use of available and sometimes dwindling resources to ensure the continuous effective safety oversight. I'm not going to use today, and as you said, we're a little bit short on time, so I won't go into the details of those acts, but suffice it to say it covers such domains as airworthiness, flight crew licensing, air traffic management, and even the drones field. Now, these actions by themselves cannot for which the common term I think we all are familiar with it is effective safety management. And it's in that same safety management context and spirit.
So I think we are experiencing some technical difficulties with Peter. So unfortunately, in such a live event, we can expect these things happen. We have overlearned how to manage this type of webinars and live events, but still we have some technical difficulties. So I hope Peter will resolve on his side the communication link, and he will be back with us. So I will maybe move on to the next questions with that. So at this stage, what I would like to do, I would like to invite you to, we are going to show you a poll with 2 questions. And before we start answering some of your questions, I would like to invite you to answer this poll. And in a few minutes, before we close the panel, we will look at the results and comment and see what was your take on these questions on the safety in your organizations. So based on that, I would like maybe now to move on to the Q&A session, question and answer session. We have received some questions. So first of all, there was some practical questions whether the slides will be available. Yes, we are going to publish on our website. I'm not sure exactly how, but there will be some communications, a summary of the conference discussions, and also some of the slides and the elements. Now, on the questions we had, I would like to ask one question to all the panelists, but I will ask them to be very short to answer just in a couple of sentences. One question is about, for the future of safety, how they see the importance or the changes, or the fact that we should not change, on the safety management system. So this new reality, this new operational landscape, what kind of impact it has on the safety management systems. So maybe I would like to turn back to, I will try Peter, in case Peter is back with us. Are you back with us? Peter? Yeah, we had some technical difficulties, so can you hear us now well? Well, apparently Peter is still struggling a little bit. So I will turn to Jim. Jim from easyJet, so can you share with us what is your view, again, in a couple of sentences? Do you think that these safety management systems should change, or are they already fit for purpose given the new reality ahead of us? Jim?
Thank you, Eric. I think there's never been a time when management systems approach has been more important, and I go back to being able to prioritize, organize, and mobilize. In terms of whether they're fit, I think that depends on where different companies are in terms of their own evolution of management systems. But I think they will have to continue to develop to meet the demands of the world we're in now. But certainly, I think, from my experience, what the value that a good management system brings the organization is now being recognized, because it's really being called upon to deliver the goods.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. I would like now to turn to Sophie to answer to the same question. So Sophie. So Sophie, so the question was, do you think that the existing safety management systems are fit for purpose given the new reality? Do we need to change them, or are they good the way they are?
From our side, we believe that this does illustrate the necessity to get a robust safety management as a backbone of this resilience, but with a common framework, common language with all relevant stakeholders within the aviation system. And it is exactly the work we are doing at industry level by the development of the SMS International Industry Standard, which is the SM001. So I believe that it may be an answer to that.
Thank you, Sophie. I would like now to turn to Osman, again for the same question in a couple of sentences. Do you think that the existing SMS systems in the ATM world are fit for purpose, Osman?
So first of all, please let me say that, as I tried to put it, it was always in a constant flow. So safety or safety management was always in a constant state of change. So we saw drones or RPS coming, we saw digital towers, continuous changes, and therefore I would say that, and perhaps I can echo Jim here, depending on the respective level of maturity of various organizations, the safety management systems as we have them defined and rolled out globally should be fit for purpose. But what we should do is we should much more move to a more data-based and risk-based approach. So our organizations are so rich, so full of, so data-rich, we should much more make use of this data. Thank you.
Thank you, Osman. So I would like now to get to some other questions from the audience. So there was maybe, as I'm with you, Osman, there was a question for you. So how do you maintain the competencies of ATCOs moved away from operational positions for a long time? So I think the question relates to this big safety issue of the recency of the aviation personnel.
Okay, so actually we worked very closely with our ATCOs and figured out that we do not talk about a degradation of technical skills, but that it's more about how to deal with less routine, how to deal with self-confidence, how to deal with stress limits and so on and so forth and so back. And therefore we established some trainings. If you may refer to the postcard, the fifth column dealt with so-called training called mental flexibility. And just to tell you, we offered 30 digital seminars, and they were booked overnight. So people were very much interested in buying in and contributing to that, and this helped a lot. So this at least was one activity, and we continue to work on it. But again, it's the magic word is together. So you have to stay in contact with your front people and to understand what is needed. And this is which should be pursued. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Osman. I think there is also another question that came quite a lot. The question is do we observe that currently, do we have factual element to see that the safety has been compromised so far in Europe? And in particular, do we see that the relative number of air safety reports has changed? Maybe I would like to have Jim replying to this question. So Jim, do you observe as an operator that safety has been compromised so far, given your current operations?
I think that's difficult to quantify. I think we have probably seen some slips and laps type events that the individuals have reported having been connected to the recency of their flying. But it's actually a very difficult point to really pin down. So I think there's not a significant elevated risk that we are jumping on, but it's more about recognizing the potential in the risk and making sure that we take actions early before they materialize. The problem with data is if you wait till you've got the data, it's too late. So I absolutely agree we need to move to a more data-driven system, but we've got to make sure the data we have, and we have enough of it, is relevant to the decisions we're making. So there are pitfalls with taking too much of a data-driven approach. So sometimes you just have to rely on subject matter expert judgment.
Thank you very much. Could I ask Sophie to answer to this question also? Sophie?
From our side, in fact, we had some increase of reported events that may be linked to, for instance, an irregular and the fact that it was due to long parking and storage issue, and with a lack of proper protection and so on. So yes, we had some reported events, but it's potential weak signals on which we had very quickly actions to anticipate on that with our operators.
Thank you. So I think the point is that we are not observing that a global decrease of safety or compression of safety in Europe, clearly, but on some specific safety issues, and that were, by the way, anticipated thanks to the work of the safety intelligence people. We can see, of course, some reports confirming the anticipation we had together. So there are a lot of questions, but I'm afraid now we are running out of time. We have a bit 6 minutes left for us. So before we close this panel, I would like that we show on the screen the results of the poll that I will discover with you, me and the panelists. So can we see the results? We had 2 questions. So the first question was, in your opinion, do you think your organization's focus on safety during the past month was fully satisfactory, somehow satisfactory, or unsatisfactory? So as you can see from the screen, and again, I discovered that with you, it's actually quite comforting and reassuring to see that a majority of the attendants of the audience think that the safety was not compromised and remained a top priority for their organization. Okay, can we see now the second question? So the second question was to see if the organization, as we mentioned with the panelists, has re-evaluated the risks because we had a new situation. And here we have about 50% saying yes, the risks were re-evaluated. I suppose the way, for instance, easyJet did it, or only partially. And what we meant here, there was not a global systemic re-evaluation, but only some partial ones. But altogether, there is a vast majority of organizations that have re-evaluated their risk. So again, this is quite comforting. So maybe I would like to ask once again a quick reaction from my panelists. So Jim, if you are still with us, can you have a quick reaction to the results of this poll?
Phew, that's good news.
Okay, so that's good news indeed. What about you, Sophie? What would be your reaction to the polls?
That's good news also. But I believe that we should ponderate also what we can see, because it depends on the level of safety culture of the organization. The more we are safety-minded, the more we may be demanding regarding our organization. So we can consider that it's not enough when we are very demanding regarding safety. So it depends also on the level of safety culture of the organization.
That's correct. What about you, Osman? Were you expecting such a good results from the poll?
Actually, I at least hoped for it, and I'm totally relieved. So I'm happy to see that. Perhaps I may add another point. I'd like to echo Sophie again. Safety is or can be understood as a costly undertaking, and I would say it's worthwhile. We should never jeopardize our future by compromising safety, in particular situations. There's another thing I would like to stress, and again, referring to Sophie, I really love to hear that. I don't want to discriminate by safety one, safety two, the good work of so many people in that area. But it's important not only when we talk about data to rely on lagging indicators like adverse events, but it's super important to invest people and time in proactive safety management. And Sophie touched on weak signals, which is an important element of a proactive safety management, to understand your system and to act before, to fly ahead of the aircraft, Jim would say maybe. So thank you very much. Let's go.
Thank you, Osman. If Peter is back with us technically, I would like to also know if he was surprised about the result of the polls. Do we have Peter online?
You do have me, Erick. Thanks.
Oh, very good, Peter.
Again, hopefully, and I'm so disappointed I wasn't able to finish off my 5 minutes. So you only got half of it, I understand. And you didn't even get my 1 minute on the future. But let's stick to the polls for now. Good results. I think it shows that we collectively have done what we needed to do to react in an appropriate way to the new safety challenges that have come about. However, you mentioned it right at the beginning with your own presentation, Erick. There's no place for complacency. We're still living and learning from this crisis. And so we need to be on our toes at all times and ready to react. In fact, we need to be ready to predict what we need to do next.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yes, sorry about the technical issues, but you're back tomorrow with us, so you have one more chance to talk with us. So on this, I think it's time now to close our panel. So I know it's a bit frustrating because it was a bit short. There are many questions that were unanswered, but I think we had some good discussions already. We addressed these different visions from a manufacturer, from the European Commission, from the ATM, and from an operator point of view, what they've done for safety and how they see safety should unfold and what we should do. I think the main text from my side that we all agree that the safety landscape was stable, very safe. Now we are in something more uncertain. There is a clear acknowledgement also that what was working before, the safety management systems at organization levels, state levels with the SSP, or even the European level with the European Plan for Aviation Safety, this is still the solution. We just need to adjust and make sure we take into account this new situation. We also heard our panelists sharing with us the importance of safety culture. Today, we don't have much data, or we did not have much data in this new situation, but it's still very important to capture data now, to monitor the return to operation, ensure it's safe, and on that, the digital tools will be important. And maybe it's a link with the panel we'll have tomorrow, presenting the Data for Safety program that is designed exactly for that. And of course, one immediate action that we all have to do is to reassess our risk. And from the poll, apparently, it's very reassuring to see that the vast majority of the organizations have done it. So on that, I'm closing this panel, and I hand back to Janet. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Erick, and thank you to everybody who took part in the panel. We saw a few of the challenges of doing things remotely, but on the whole, I think we were able to have a good discussion regardless of that.